So a few folk have asked me about the kind of flies that I'm using here on Garry. So I thought I'd do a YouTube video on that. Just to let you know, this is my first YouTube fly tying video, and I do not pretend to tie the world's neatest flies. But these are the kind of flies that I'm using here at the minute. So I'd just like to tell you the reasons why I'm using them, and then during the tying some of the more unusual methods that I'm using to tie these flies. So I've been fishing here for a little bit over 10 years now, and first, I don't know, half of that, first 4 or 5 years, I was using all the traditional Scottish wets, you know, the Clan Chiefs, Alexandra, Bibios, all the usual stuff. And I've got to be honest, I did not do very well. A couple of little fish, and that was it. Now, I knew there was plenty of big fish here, and I also knew I wasn't catching them, so obviously I was doing something wrong. The kind of light bulb went off one day when I was watching something in the margins, something big chasing something little. So I stuck on a fry imitation. I don't have the exact fly with me, it got battered, but you know, usual kind of little fry imitation. So and that day I caught my first decent brownie, probably about £5. So obviously that fly stayed on my cast for quite a while after that, and I started catching fish. So which got me thinking, mostly over the winter, maybe the fish here like things a little bigger. So I was still doing this traditional wets, so I started tying them in the bigger sizes, size 6s and 8s, and yes, I picked up the odd fish, but I was still struggling. So then I started tying more of these kind of fry imitations, things such as these, but also basically lures. So I started tying these, and yes, caught more fish and bigger fish. So I knew I was onto something. So obviously the logical progression was bigger is better. So I started tying even bigger flies, which is when I started using these kind of things. I call this a Garry mole. So things like dog nobblers and these kind of fry imitations. Now, I got a lot of fish on these hitting. However, there was also a lot of misses, and I was kind of tearing my hair out for about half a season. Anyway, I decided the reason why I was getting so many misses was because there was so much material here that fish was going for it, but they just weren't getting hooked. Because if you close your mouth on that, I mean, for starters, there's some pretty great big lead dumbbell eyes, and I just think all of this material was masking the hook point. So anyway, one day I was tying some salmon flies on tubes for a customer, and I realised that that problem had been solved. Tube flies with single wide gape hooks, and since then I can't think I've had a single miss of a fish that's actually gone for it. I haven't missed. So that's the reason I am tying these. First of all, fish go for them because they are big. And second of all, when they do go for them, they're actually getting hooked as opposed to these old flies I was using. Now, for me, this is now just common sense. A big fish, if you want a big fish, there is absolutely no point in throwing a size 10, 12 at them. Fair enough, if it goes straight past its nose, yeah, it'll open its mouth and take it. But it's not going to chase it. It's not going to. A big old trout is not going to move to chase a size 10, 12. It's, you know, it's just not going to bother using all that energy up. Whereas something like this, it warrants that kind of expenditure of all its energy to chase something, because it's going to get a nice meal. So that is the reason why. So now we'll look at some of the materials I'm using and then the methods that I'm using with those materials I'm going to be using. So for the tubes themselves, I'm using TubeWorks stuff. So in a tube I'm going to be using a 6mm tungsten weight today, and some soft silicone tubing which acts as a hook guide. So that's the tube itself, and then the materials I'm going to be using. I do love this. This is UV polar chenille as part of the rear body, and then we've got some Arctic foxtail. Really only use the guard hairs on this. There's a lot of underfur which needs to be pulled out. So what the thinking behind these flies I'm using is you want size and volume but not weight, so as light as possible. So you're using big long materials and you're getting rid of all of the underfur and to try and cut down on the weight. I've also got some ostrich shell, and then one of my favourite materials at the minute is Lady Amherst centre tail feathers, and you can just see this barring kind of mottled effect, and they really do look like the spots on a brown trout or something. And then some spay plumes, which is ostrich feathers. Big fan of this stuff at the minute. Fake jungle cock. It has a tendency to bend, so you need to keep it quite short. It's the only thing. Some schlappen feathers. And then the last head material is going to be this American hen hackle from Future Fly. I've got an orange grizzle and I've got plain black hen. So that's all the materials. So how to make the tube up. So first of all, it's about an inch and a quarter of inner tube, and I'm just going to heat one end with the lighter to burr the end over just very slightly, and hopefully you can see that. So that's just got a little lip on it, and then once it's cool I'm going to put the soft silicone tubing over it, and this acts as a hook guide. Now this comes in lots of different colours. The two colours I'm using at the minute are clear and orange. And then I'm using a 6mm tungsten weight, which I'm going to glue and then cover with thread. Now the thread I'm going to be using just to cover this is big pike fly thread. Just speeds the whole process up. So I'll do that. Okay. So that's the 6mm tungsten tube. I've super glued it, and then I'll run a whole load of pike time thread over it. And you see at the front I've tried to taper it down, which will help you when you come to tie the head and put the cone over the front. So now it's time for the Arctic fox tail, and also the rear body flashy stuff. So I've changed thread back to the normal Vivus 10.0 thread. You can see we've got the Arctic fox tail and also the large UV chenille in place. Next thing to do is the Arctic fox body and wing all in one, which I'm going to do in a dubbing loop. So this is something that you might not have seen before if you're tying the traditional Scottish flies. So nicely waxed thread, and that helps. The wax is going to grip the material, so you'll find it easier to hold everything in place. So what's that, about 5-inch long dubbing loop, twice round the tube, and then I'm going to wrap the loop around the thread, which closes the loop at the top. A couple of wraps forward, and then whilst you're getting everything into place, I like to just rest it in there. And then you cut a piece of the Arctic foxtail, and again you need to make sure that all the under fur is out. You don't want any of that, because that's just going to add bulk to the fly. And you can use all sorts of brushes, a toothbrush, gum cleaning brush, but the best one I've found is my old dog's grooming brush. So remove some of the bulk of the fluff by hand, and then if you run it through this, it clears a lot of the fluff, but it also lines the fibres up, so they're all kind of neatly lined up. So then I try and do it one more time. Oops, making a mess. Stay there. Do it one more time, and then hopefully all your fibres are lined up. So just trim off a few of the ends. Get your dubbing loop, open it up, place the fur. Okay, try not to drop the dubbing spinner. Place the fur in the loop, and you want just a couple of mil extending outside the loop, and then just manipulate it so it's nice and even. Gotta be honest, that's one of the worst ones I've done in a long time. Not very even or neat. Anyway. And then spin your dubbing spinner just a few times, gently to start with, which will close the loop at the bottom. And there you go. So that's now all in place. See that bit better. And then what I'm going to do is hold the bottom of the loop and give it a good spin. And then move it away from your bobbin and your body, etc. And what you want to do is make sure that all this hair, fur, whatever, is perpendicular to your loop, because otherwise it'll all spin. So very gentle to start with. I've only given it one spin. So try and get everything perpendicular, and then again hold the bottom of the loop, give it a really good spin, and then allow the hair just to, the dubbing loop to spin. So the idea is that this loop has now captured all the hairs, and I tend to start off with a dubbing needle to get the worst of it out, and then go in with a brush. And you can be really quite rough. If you've spun it enough, none of this hair should come out. Right, so hopefully you can see that. And now I'm just gonna, just like you would a hackle, you bend all the fibres back, and when you come to wind this on, I don't like to do touching turns, just very gently, well, even but not touching, because you want these hairs all to be able to stand out, and that's what's going to give you the volume and the kind of bulky appearance to the fly. And in my opinion, bigger the better. So that's that, and then just tie that off, tie the end of the loop off. This is spinning around. Okay, so just give that. And the good thing about tying really big flies is there's lots of room. There we go. Right. So that's the tail and rear half of the body done. And now what you can do is go back in with your brush and give it a good brushing. So I've added some black DNA, which is this black sparkle. So it's only about half a dozen strands. I've added it, quite like it as a lateral line. It really does show up in the water. So that's already just been tied in. And now it's time for the Lady Amherst centre tail fibres, and I'm going to add these in a dubbing loop. So I've made my dubbing loop, it's quite long, probably about 6 inches, well waxed. Again, the wax grips the fibres so it doesn't all slip out. And I'm going to be using a piece of cardboard just to line them all up, and then this it's like a huge bulldog clip, which I found in a catering shop. It's for, you know, when you've opened a bag of flour or bag of crisps or whatever, and it is perfect. So I've got about, this is an early season fly, so I want to keep my colours quite subtle. So we've probably got about 5 fibres of orange, about the same of yellow, and probably a dozen brown, and also probably a little bit more in the natural. And what I'm going to do is pull them all out, kind of, you know how they grip together. So you want to take each fibre and place it on this piece of card with probably, what's that, 6-7 mil of the butt end over the edge of the cardboard. And then once that's all done, I'm going to try to, well, and then I'm going to put it into my dubbing loop via the bulldog clip. Now, the trick here is to be very gentle. Try and keep them all, you know how the fibres have all got a natural curvature on them. In an ideal world, you would want that all to be the same way, and for all of them to be perpendicular and not crossed over. So that's going to take me a couple of minutes, so we'll skip that stage. Right, so I'm going to try and do this so you can see on the camera. The Amherst fibres have all been placed on this card, and now what you'll need to do is not breathe. There's any drafts and they'll all go absolutely everywhere. Try and be as gentle as you can, and you just want to capture the tail ends of these fibres. Now I can't see because I'm trying to do it for the camera. There you go. So we'll get rid of the piece of card, and then I'm going to trim the ends. Pair of scissors. Right. So your tail fibres are all lined up in your clamp clip, and now you just need to put it into your dubbing loop. Right, so I'm going to put my finger into the bottom of the loop and then give it a couple of turns, and this is going to close the end of the loop, so when you remove your finger it should capture these tails. So again, we've probably got, I don't know, 3 or 4 mil of tails. Just try and even them up a little bit. Give it a few more spins just to tighten it. Now the trick here is you want these fibres, try and move it round, hopefully you can see that, you want these fibres kind of, again, perpendicular. If they're all crossing, that when you start to spin, you're just going to end up with a mess. So I'm going to hold the bottom of the loop nice and tight and give this a really good spin. holding the loop so it's free from your vise, your material and your bobbin, and then just let it go. I love that. And this is one of my favourite bits. And then just help them round, tease them out, and that's about it. And it's this barring, spotty effect, and in the water it just resembles the spots on a brown trout. I just love this. Anyway, so now you need to part them and try and fold them back, and hopefully you can see that, and then wrap it round. Like that. You need to move the bobbin thread out of the way every so often. Now sometimes you can end up with gaps, and if you end up with gaps, it's very simple. You can just push these fibres down, or move them whichever way you want, so that those gaps get filled. I think one of them's gone in backwards. You'll always get one. So I like to pass that loop round one more time and then capture all those butt ends with your bobbin thread. And on the other side, there is no way they are coming out. And just remove the loop, and then there's always one that doesn't like to sit nicely, so just tidy this up. A few fibres, just clean with the scalpel. And have a look. Okay. So next I'm going to tie in some ostrich spay plume. Now this is basically, I'm going to tie this in just like you would a hackle, and what you're looking for, turn it the other way around so you can see, is one with a nice oval shape. You can sometimes get them with awful kind of scraggly fibres. Anyway, I've chosen two nice ones here. This one looks like the best one to me, and I'm going to take the tip out, and I keep these for my smaller flies. So I only want the fibres that are about an inch long. So take the top out, keep that for one of my salmon flies, and then you need to try and manipulate these fibres so when you wind it on, they're all facing back the way. So a pair of hackle pliers onto the stalk, and then just pull them all back. So we've now got something I can tie in. Okay. And this is a lovely little trick. I'm going to, I don't know how to describe it, I'm just going to run my scissors up the stalk of the feather, and this just helps all the fibres to lay back the way, so you're not when you try to wind it on, you're not fighting fibres every which way. Hackle pliers, and then just like you would a hackle, wind it on. So I'm going to give it either probably 2-3 turns. So that's your rear hackle, first of the hackles in place. So we'll just tidy that up, give it some pressure, give it a nice shape. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Right, so next we're going to, alright, optional extra. I do quite like, again, it's the whole spotty thing. Bronze mallard. And I'm going to be, the next hackle I'm going to be putting on is another black one. No, sorry, orange then black. And this bronze mallard just gives it a bit of contrast. So, same as the ostrich, I'm going to tie it in by the tip. So we'll skip over this bit. But tie it in by the tip, pull all these fibres back, and again, use the sharp edge of your scissors just to give the fibres a bit of a bend or a kink next to the stalk, which again helps them stay facing back the way. So and one thing I should say, the waist on these spay plumes, you can put them into a dubbing loop. So instead of winding the spay plume on, like I have done this time, like a hackle, if you want dog nobblers or marabou lures, you can put this into a dubbing loop, so it's not wasted. Anyway, so we'll just wrap this bronze mallard. So just give it a little bit of a brush, because you don't want to do this after you've put your jungle cock on. That's fine. Okay. So, jungle cock. So we're looking for the fake jungle cock somewhere. Here it is. I'll be using this stuff today. Now I do like this. It's not particularly cheap. But it is a little bit more heavy duty. The only problem with it is that it does have a tendency to bend back on itself. If I was to use all of this, and that must be nearly an inch, I'm sure that would bend back after a few casts. So I'll just make sure it's in line. Okay. So quite short is the trick with this fake jungle cut. Okay. Starting to look like a fly. And now it's really just the two head hackles. So like I said, I'm a big fan of orange. Two reasons. I think if you're trying to imitate a little bait fish, Arctic, like I mentioned, Arctic char here in Garry, so when they turn into their spawning colours, there's always a bit of orange. And also at the front, at the head end, this little bit of grizzle orange, it kind of resembles the gills of any bait fish. So a hackle of orange, followed by one of these, which is the American Future Fly hen hackle, as your last hackle. So I'm sure you all know how to do that, so we'll skip that bit. Right, so that's one of the problems with GoPro cameras, their batteries are useless. So a few hours later, after recharging it, so that's the front two head hackles on, head finished, given it a bit of varnish, and now it's just for the cone head. So these are the ones I like. They are Pro Sport Fisher cones, and you can either get them in cones or discs. That's one of the medium black cones, quite heavy, but because I've used the 6mm tungsten, I'm going to use one of these discs. Like that. They cover up a multitude of sins in the head, so I know the head isn't the prettiest thing you'll have seen, but a little bit of super glue, just a couple of little dabs, and then try not to glue it to your fingers, making sure it's straight. Which it isn't. And I've now got it on my fingers. Okay. Now, I know a lot of the videos I've seen when it comes to melting and burring over the plastic inner tube to secure the cone, they tell you to leave about 1 or 2 mil. Now I've done that before and I disagree, it's just not enough. So there's probably about 4 mil I'd say here. And this is the way I do it. Right, so what you need is a lighter, and I like the needle to still be in it, and then the plastic tube seems to melt over it. So, and you're just doing the very tip of the flame. Sorry, not the tip of the flame, the blue part of the flame. So what we've got is a very large fly, that is also very light. And so the last few years I've been using these on a 6-weight fly rod. I've just moved up to a 7 for this season. And we'll give it a swim in the fish tank and see what it looks like. So before I show you the one I've just made today in the fish tank or swim tank, here's a few others I've done. So that's a different type of head, so that's the cone head. Adds quite a lot more weight, which is quite good because it does this motion in the water when you're retrieving it, quite an up and down motion. So that one's got a bit of blue. So I was using that one at the start of the season. Here's one that's had quite a few swims. It's not looking quite as pretty, but a bit more colour in that one. And then this one, quite a lot more orange in it. So some orange bronze mallard and orange rubber legs. So I'll probably use that one towards the end of the season. And here's some flies. I just think they look gorgeous in a picture frame, so I've got these in my fishing room. So if you're looking on YouTube for other videos, the ones that I've learnt a lot from, if you look for intruder flies, that's basically a lot of spinning of material, and other searches you can do is April Vokey. She ties beautiful flies for steelhead, and also O.P. Skagit. He's quite a genius when it comes to tying flies in dubbing loops and everything to do with dubbing loops. O.P. Skagit is the man you want to look for. Right, so I'll put this one on my little fishing rod and we'll see what it looks like in the water. This is my swim tank. It's basically just a big plastic tub with 12-volt battery, 12-volt bilge pump and a central divider, which allows which forces the water to circulate in a more kind of nice round way. I've got my little fishing rod with the fly, and the hooks I tend to use are these tube singles. I'm using size 2, 4s and 6s. I've got a nice wide gape. So we'll give it a swim. So you can see the profile, the outline is quite a serious mouthful for the fish. It's basically the biggest fly that I can happily throw with a 6-7 weight, and it's big enough for a big old trout to chase. You know, he's going to move a good couple of meters if he sees this, and that is the whole theory behind these kind of flies that I'm tying. I hope you found it useful.